and welcome to our webinar on AI's growing impact, how tech will reshape our client engagement. I'm your host today, Keara Bradley, Vice President of Strategic Markets at Oak Street Funding. Joining me today is Adriene McCance, Managing Director of Wealth Management at UPTIQ. Today, she and I will be discussing evolving trends in AI, practical strategies, key risks, and what these changes really mean for firms. Adriene, thanks so much for joining.
Thank you for having me.
So before we begin, do you mind telling our audience just a little bit more about yourself and your background?
Yeah, so I spent at least about 6 years as a financial advisor and then became COO of an RIA endeavor. So I've sat on both sides of the desk. I've been the advisor trying to prep for a client meeting with 12 tabs open. I've been the operations person trying to onboard a new client and trying to do all the manual work. And I've been the person trying to kind of manage both. At UPTIQ, most recently, I work with RIAs who have excellent teams, but are constrained by fragmented systems. And my job is to help them remove friction and kind of unlock growth.
Thanks so much for sharing that. To start us off, how is AI changing the day-to-day workflow, the client onboarding process, data collection, and even early client interactions for firms and clients?
Oh boy, big question.
We'll start with a loaded one.
So I feel like onboarding has always been this weird contradiction. It's your first impression with a new client, and they should feel super taken care of, but they're also like buried in paperwork. They have to send in all these forms. They don't know which ones they've already sent in. And then, God forbid, there's a NIGO that happens, and your team is spending a ton of time doing manual data entry. And AI is just completely flipping that. Like, we can get the documents collected. It tells them what they've already sent in, what's still missing. The data gets extracted automatically, validated, put into your CRM. The systems get populated across your various systems. And what used to take weeks is happening in days. It's literally magical. And that's what we see and hear from advisors when they see some of the things that are happening. It's like, imagine, we are spinning up a unique client portal, requesting only those docs that are needed, extracting that data, securely asking for their social security number, passing that over to the custodian, picking out the positions from the brokerage statement. It's just awesome. And then my personal favorite for any organization nerds out there is that it can like sync to your file folder structure. Make a little household folder in the exact format that you want. Organize all of those underlying docs with the naming conventions that you want. And then fill out the paperwork and send it for signature. And all of that happens in 20 minutes versus what used to take 15 to 30 days.
From your perspective, what parts of client engagement, specifically in financial services, do you think are being transformed the fastest by AI? And what could this mean for RIA firms?
Yeah, client engagement is really interesting. I would say that there's kind of three components that are moving the fastest. One is meeting preparation, just the ability to extract data from all the previous conversations that you've had before, be able to structure the client meeting that's going to happen. We like to have a little brag sheet, for example, that says all the things that you've done for them over the past year. So it's really easy to demonstrate value. And then the next part is the follow through, being able to take the transcript, what happened in that meeting, and start to actually do the workflows, assign those tasks, get those actions started. And then I would say the third is proactive outreach. So AI that can really monitor data across systems, surface things before a client calls you, when a house goes on the market, if a CD is maturing, if a life event is approaching. It switches advisors from being really reactive to having proactive interactions. And I think that's the big kind of unlock.
So as firms grow, whether organically or through M&A, how do you see AI influencing their ability to scale client engagement, integrate teams and data, and maintain a consistent client experience?
Yeah, I think that it's going to change a couple of different items. One, it'll be like, a huge discussion point in the industry is what to do about retiring advisors. Well, now with AI, you can go through, mine all their former notes and documents. You can set up a little AI. We haven't done this yet, but I'm dying to do it if anybody wants to. You can set up a little AI to just ask them a ton of questions about that client. So then what if you all of a sudden have this repository of the advisor who knew them really well? And I have a good friend who sold his practice, and the bigger firm had an advisor join, supposed to take over. And he was like, honestly, this younger advisor is just not doing a good job, but I'm supposed to be out in 6 months. So what's going to happen? So with AI, how can you start to record and capture all the data that that advisor who knows those clients really well has and be able to pull that context in the future? Um, I think the other really big item for firms is going to be, I think of it as like being able to perform at your best at all times. Like we've all had these moments where we kind of show up to a client meeting a little underprepared. It was like it was really busy that day, or we had lots of calls and sort of we're rushing over to this client. Or I used to have this client, kid you not, $100 million client, and he would drop in after his soul cycle classes. And he was like fully in cycling gear, and he would just be like, hey, wanted to check in on what's going on. And I'm like, we don't have a scheduled time. All the documents aren't prepared. And so I think this also changes that. I often get asked too by advisors who have lived through the financial crisis. Like, what do we do if there's a crisis and I'm managing a ton of clients? Like, AI as a system can help pull insights forward in a really incredible way so that you're not starting from scratch being panicked. All of a sudden, you have the core elements of what's happening in someone's portfolio, the last conversations you've had, what's important to them, and you have an immediate idea of how to structure that.
And as a lender that focuses pretty heavily in the M&A space, we see this all the time. I just think that the more time that's spent on the things like data collection and preparing for meetings and the stuff that is so incredibly tedious, the less time they have for the actual client interaction and thinking about growing the firm and getting it from point A to point B. So
Kira, I think that's so right. And like one of the things that I've had people start coming to me and saying is, hey, look, I want to double the firm, triple the firm without adding any headcount. And like, what is that going to do for M&A margins, for owners, for advisors? I mean, I just think that there's so much growth opportunity there as people think about creating more efficiencies. And someone's going to be able to capture that.
I totally agree. So, on the flip side, for smaller RA firms that maybe don't have a large tech budget, what do you think some practical first steps might be where they can begin leveraging AI effectively?
I think number one is you just start with something small. Sometimes I talk to firms and they're trying to do this big, enormous project, and it just becomes overwhelming for all the employees. I think start with something that's important to you. Onboarding, meeting prep, chasing documents. It doesn't have to be particularly complex, but it's just about giving the team confidence that this is the right path to go down. And then I promise once you start with one thing, the team will pull you in other directions. We've seen that so often. Somebody will start with one agent, and then by the end of 3 months, they want 6 other agents that can do various different things because they're like, this would be awesome. Can you also pull out this and pull this over and make this report? And like, we can do all those things, but it's good to just start.
Yeah.
And the other thing I would say, and you guys may see this too, is people either want to rip out their tech stack or they're like constantly shopping for a new CRM. Like the dream is like, okay, well, if I just go to Salesforce, they will solve all.
It'll change everything. Thanks.
It'll change everything. And it never does. Like I've done Salesforce implementation projects. What happens is You get this $1 million bill from Salesforce. You have to do a really complex implementation in which you have to like think through all of the different steps, and you're going to invariably forget something. And it's just so hard. And I had a really good meeting with an advisor um maybe about a month ago where he said, "Hey, look, this tech looks amazing, but I'm so burnt out after doing a Salesforce implementation that it's hard for me to think of anything." And I think the way that people should think about it is like now what it's going to happen is there's an intelligence layer that's sitting on top of your CRM, across your document sharing system, across your custodian relationship. And it's that intelligence layer that's going to be able to create different agents and give you the width and capabilities that you always kind of hoped the CRM would be able to do. But
And
sound like you guys see that a lot.
totally. Yes. Yes.
Like, let me just move CRMs or let me just change this and it'll update everything.
Yes, absolutely. So, as this intelligence layer does help to get more and more tasks automated, being such a people focused industry, how do you think businesses maintain that personal trust and relationship driven service that their clients are so accustomed to? And how is it also shaping what good communication looks like?
Yeah, I think that's such a good question because the core of it really is it's you're not building trust by filling out a manual form, right? Like that's not what's really going to build trust. What's going to build trust is you being able to come into every meeting super prepared as though you completely know what's happening with that client. And I think that's what the best firms are going to start to be able to do. It's going to be as though they're going to position it so that it's taking what their best advisor has been able to do and applying that to the advisors across the firm and creating trust in that way. And I think there's going to be a big difference over time in the people who are able to do that with AI effectively and the people who are not. And I think as you're recruiting advisors, they're also going to see that. What type of firm are you? How much are you using technology? How does that influence my pay? Um, and so I think it's those. I think it's AI is going to enable somebody to do really proactive, incredible outreach. That's like, I know what your favorite sports team is. It's drafting an email to me saying congratulations on the win. I can see that your house went up for sale on Zillow. It's drafting an email for me on that. I can see that you're this type of client. It's providing these cross-sell opportunities.
Great answer. Now, on the flip side of things, as more businesses do adopt AI, what risks do you think these companies face if they're slower to integrate it into their workflows?
I think it's exactly what we were saying. I think that they will continue along for a while, for a good amount of time with the clients that they have, but they won't experience the growth that other firms are going to be able to have. Think about that sense of client engagement, even just for prospects, right? Let's say your prospect rate is pretty good. Let's say it's 70%. You're converting 70% of all prospects. What about that extra 30%? How are you keeping up with them? The ability to do things like connecting to their LinkedIn and saying, hey, I know when that person has switched jobs, so I should make another outreach. I know when this has happened, when that has happened. Over time, that's all going to lead to deeper conversion. And I think the other part of it is always, most clients still are working with two different advisors. And
Right.
as they start to work to consolidate, which advisor are they going to go to? The one who's significantly more proactive or
Right.
the one who's scheduling a meeting every quarter?
Yeah, great point. And what risks do you think firms should be mindful of as they do incorporate more AI into all of their client interactions, and how can they maybe avoid some common missteps?
I think there's a big thing in the industry about trust but verify. And I think take that same lens here.
Sure.
Think a lot about any tool that you're adopting. You should be asking, how are you doing quality control? How will the system catch if something is going wrong? There should be self-reinforcing items within the system itself to know when something looks a little bit off and highlight that to a user. And then there should also be systems within it where like somebody can very easily see the logic and the auditability of what the LLM is doing. And so you should have a button where you can say, can I see exactly how this was made, how this logic came to be, and where is this information pulling from? So one example is like, we work a lot with banks and credit unions on the underwriting side. And we can create for them like an Excel spreadsheet of the model. And they can click into one of the cells and it'll pull up the linking PDF of exactly where that data came from. And I think as we're thinking about AI and wealth management, that same concept should exist. Where are you pulling this client's child's name from? And it should be able
Right.
to the conversation and say it.
Yeah.
And I think those are the links that you really want to see. I think another one I see people really concerned about is security, um, and specifically around the data going into that LLMs. And so I thought it might be worth it to just like have a quick example of kind of how that works. So typically, the LLM flows into the application, right? But in most software that's now being created, there's kind of a block wall with the LLM where no data is going back to the LLM. And that's part of the enterprise grade controls. And so firms can have that in place where they can use somebody like an UPTIQ, a Jump, or a Zox because that control is in place. And then there's other firms who are taking that a big step further where they're doing a private cloud deployment. So it's on their AWS system. But honestly, that's also super complex. So if you're not a big firm, that's really hard to do. Um, and even for some of the bigger firms, you know, I think there's this idea of, hey, I'm just going to hire like a couple of AI people and they're going to come in and they're going to build everything for me. And like, that's a lot harder than it seems. Like, it is all over LinkedIn. Like, it's like, doop, doop, doop. And then you have like a magical agent that can do everything.
Right.
Yeah, in like the area of wealth, it's complex. You need it to be enterprise grade. You need it to work 99.99999% of the time. And you need the maintenance to be there. And so I've seen people struggle a little bit when they're trying to build everything, when they're trying to build things in house and they're using a team that maybe doesn't really have wealth experience, but they're
Or
AI engineers.
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Have you
Um,
come across a lot of people doing that, hiring AI talent?
More and more now. We go to a ton of conferences. We hear so much content on this. We're seeing more and more AI vendors offering consulting, different services. So we see that a lot in the conference space and on the lending side. Obviously, that costs money. And so that's something that we would lend money for as well. In the right circumstances. So yeah, we see that more and more. I feel like every quarter.
That's really interesting that
Yeah.
people are coming to you for lending
Yeah.
to hire an AI team
Yeah.
or to bring on an AI consultant.
Yeah,
Which, yeah,
it is.
so it's really cool.
Yeah. We've kind of already touched on this, but just in summary, in the next few years, how do you see AI overall reshaping the client advisor relationship across banking, professional services, and wealth management as a whole?
Yeah, I think it's going to be um, really in two or three parts. I think there's engagement. I think there's operational efficiency. And then I think there's this area of kind of prospecting, cross-selling, um, uplifting that's happening. And so, I think a big thing is the advisors going from generalist to specialist. And the AI is handling with so much depth and being able to lift up different parts of the conversation that the advisor is going to be able to have more time to serve more clients, talk to the clients that they have. I really think it's about giving advisors the space to perform at their best across a bigger spectrum of items. Um, and I think part of that is the operational efficiency. It's taking over some of the cognitive load, tracking the details, monitoring the data, checking to make sure that that cash isn't sitting in the wrong money market fund. Um, all of those things that sometimes clients can get really irritated at, but are really
Right.
small. And I can take that off your plate. And I see some big firms already kind of working on this. Like I think Vlad at Dynasty, I think Trevor at Sequoia, I think Mark at Focus are doing a really great job of making this super enterprise wide. And I think the client advisory relationship is going to get stronger, not weaker with the technology.
Well, Adrienne, I want to thank you so much for being here today and sharing your insights with our audience. Thank you also to those who tuned in and submit questions. We appreciate your continued viewership. Just stay tuned for more from us here at Oak Street Funding with new content and new guests. Thanks again.
Thank you, guys.